We are live. Izzy?
Hi.
Hi, how are
Sorry, I
you?
was just retweeting that, making sure it went through. Hi, everyone.
I just met you about 5 minutes ago, and I'm a little starstruck.
No, you're so sweet. Thank you so much for inviting me to do this interview with you.
Well, thanks for joining me. So you're going to see how poor my Zoom skills are. How do I share screen? Right there. Okay, so you can see my screen. This is Miss Izzy's Twitter. This is how I found her, and I fell in love with her trading style and started following her. So this is her page. It is at underscore ms underscore izzy. She has 55,000 followers. She has her own website. Her website is Miss Izzy Trades, and from binge watching her videos, she trades price action. So that's why I thought this would be a good fit. She is pure price action gal, very little indicators, and I like that. And I read your history online, and you came from a cannabis background, that's TheChartGuys. That's how we started.
Oh, really? That's
Yeah,
awesome.
and commodities was my first love. So we have that in common.
That's great. Yeah, my background really stems from commodity trading. So I am a price action trader, but a lot of what I do is based on macro analysis and overall market sentiment. So I kind of incorporate that with price action because I always say sentiment's primary, but and price action is secondary, right? So
Yeah, I like that.
because you need proper sentiment to even get that really good price action.
And your whole concept of time, the way that you explain time is just different. And when you explain sticks, it's totally different. So, how'd you get into trading? You mentioned commodities, but tell us a little bit about that. And I'm just going to make sure everything is working on our end. Okay, everything's live.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things. I've done a lot of these interviews. I get asked that question a lot, but I think most of it really stems from, being in high school during the recession. I'm from the largest oil capital in Canada, so we're second to Houston. So really oil driven. And then the 2008, recession and correction really impacted my city personally, right? So
Yeah,
a lot of family members, friends. That's when I was still in high school then back in 2007. So I was reading a lot about the markets. I couldn't really trade yet. And then I finally, when I turned 18, I opened my account. I worked in tech sales too. So obviously I was interested in, names like Apple and waiting for Facebook and all those
yeah,
other big stocks to kind of, to IPO. Shopify, of course, that was like my
yes.
biggest favorite IPO. I actually worked for, I didn't really share this, but I actually worked for a small hedge fund, and it was mostly Canadian and tech stocks that he was investing in. So that was one of the assignments that I had, was doing my back end research on Shopify. So we
Very
bought
cool.
that really low, like back then. So a lot of it stemmed from a lot of Canadian investing for sure. So um, Canadian crude, lots of the cannabis. So then we surge into the cannabis names. I think probably around like 2012, 13, 14. Uh, and then that's when I made my way to Twitter. So by the time I made my way to Twitter, I already was super involved in Canadian markets and the tech markets, not so much in
In the
any other
US.
US markets. So that's kind of where I was like, what are all these like micro cap and small cap stocks? And I started doing that, and then
What's
eventually
interesting,
moved on to options.
I'm from Louisiana, which is like the offshore drilling in Louisiana is huge, and my dad works for an oil company, and that's
Oh,
how I
that's
got
awesome.
involved in trading. His stock went down to like $2, and I'm like, my trading person's charging me 12%, and all my money's in a REIT commission. Like, let me buy a few shares of my dad's company, and it went to $20 in 4 months. And I'm like, I am a genius. Like, I am so smart, which is obviously the worst thing that can happen, because obviously I wasn't. I was just lucky. So, but yeah, interesting, because I had that interest because my dad and where I'm from. So that's very similar with
Yeah,
our.
and I feel like there's always someone. So I low key have a cousin that's a multi-millionaire, maybe even billionaire now from trading. And I don't talk to him, which is weird. Like I
How
haven't
is he
talked to him
single?
since
I
I
have a
was
single daughter. No, I'm
no,
kidding.
he's married with three kids. But yeah, like I know that he lived with us a long time ago, like when he wasn't working, he was trading full time, and my parents were nice enough to let him live with us when I was younger. I just kind of like briefly have memories of him because I was pretty young. But I know he was into trading, and it clearly worked for him. He probably caught the end of that correction,
Yeah.
but back upwards. So I figured that there's always going to be opportunities. It's just an eye opener, right? Especially when you have people that you're close to or were close to or know that you've seen success in the markets with, right? So
Right.
it kind of always had me interested. But yeah, obviously Twitter was a huge part in gaining that confidence and building a community on there. It's a different world out there.
One of the most fascinating things that I found about your page, which drew me to you, was your pinned tweet. Do you want to show them? Do you want to share screen and show them your pinned tweet?
Oh yeah, and you guys want to see my crazy spy chart right now? So
That too.
let's see. You guys can see that?
Oh yeah, I love those yellow lines.
Yellow is my favorite color, by the way. So
Oh.
every time people are like, why do you have so much yellow lines? It's because that's my favorite color, and I want to use yellow because it's my favorite color.
Bam.
So pin tweet from 2017.
Yeah, on your page.
Yeah, so this right here, so this is exactly what I was talking about there. Like I said, at that point, I already was pretty advanced, I would say, in commodity trading, the Canadian markets for sure. And then I developed a really strong strategy around the micro caps, mostly biotech plays. I used to do a ton of research on the biotechs, focused a lot on the Canadian biotechs because I could actually look them up on Health Canada and do my research. And 2016 is when I dived into options. So that's when I first wanted to learn about option trading. I was really, really advanced in technical analysis, I would say, at that time by then. So it seemed almost too easy. And that's where you talk about how you said that beginner's luck.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even me being experienced with almost a decade of experience at that time, I was still new to options. So that was a whole nother world for me, right?
And
so,
options will leave you crying in the gutter if you don't know what
yeah,
you're
well,
doing.
for me, it was like I had really, really great trades to start off with. And a lot of it was because, well, I was already trading for a long time. I already knew a lot of TA. I already knew a lot of, sentiment rotations and those shifts and such. But I didn't really factor in the Greeks as much as I should have, or news, or picking like proper expiration dates and all those sorts of things. And for me, actually, that tweet there was bad luck, a combination of that. So Google got hit with a really nasty lawsuit for like $1 billion or something stupid.
I remember that.
And I had just entered like a massive position. So it was just oversizing, getting overconfident, right? So it just kind of set me back. And I don't think it was so much that I wanted to give up on trading entirely. I just felt like I put in so much effort and I saw so much success only to throw it away in such a short period of time. Right? It's kind of like one or two bad trades just from oversizing and being overconfident that kind of took me down. So I just had to reset. I took some time off Twitter, off trading. I think I took probably 3 months off trading just to kind of go back to my roots, really take the time to study, right? So I made it my goal to really understand risk reward ratios and the Greeks, whether they're the primary or secondary Greeks. So I know going forward, right? Like, well, what it is that I need to do to protect my portfolio. And that's all it comes down to. It's not about being right. It's not about being wrong. It's about just knowing how much to risk on, risk off, and measuring your risk. So that's been my huge motto for the month of September is measured risk, right? A lot of traders don't know how to measure their risk reward ratio. They don't know their medians. They don't know, they could be on the right side of the trade. Like today for SPY, for instance, you could have been short into the afternoon and still got killed because it was a premium killer. Right. So understanding a flat range and versus a range that's moving in a clear direction, whether it's up or down, but also knowing how much overall upside and downside risk you have. Because I always think that that's measured. People just seem to think that it's not, but it is. And that was a really big learning lesson for me personally. 2018 was a great year for me once I started doing a combination of, back to my commons, a little bit of options, but figuring out what works for me, right? So naturally I'm pretty conservative in life. I'm conservative, right? I'm really, really, really introverted. So I just went back and I was like, well, maybe it's not the options, maybe it's the stocks that I'm trading options on, right? And that's where I started to find my own edge in options trading.
Yeah, if you want to toggle back from the share screen so they can see your face, and then we'll go back to the charts. We'll go back and forth. So that's the backstory on. I've seen you trading Kroger and I want to say was it Walgreens, but you made a comment about high tech, and I'm like, I wonder what the story is there. Is the high beta? You just don't. You're done with them?
No, I'm not done with them. I still trade tech a lot. You can watch my Netflix, my Tesla videos.
Okay.
But I always say that you have to have your own edge in trading, and mine has been, I think definitely once I started doing my own strategy, my own research over that year of 2017, I figured out my own scans, the things that I'm comfortable with, things that I can understand based on math, right? So I'm like, okay, well, math is a strong suit of mine, so maybe I should look at this from a more mathematical approach. And it just seemed that the lower volatility plays had a better ratio when it comes to that in terms of a calculated risk, right? So that's why I was saying, if you saw my my 2021 theme was boring is soaring, right? So that's why I was playing Kroger, Pfizer. Today and yesterday and last week we played IBM, which was one of the few stocks to survive right now, and also in the last correction. So I always say I only trade Tesla when she tells me to trade her, right? I only trade those names when market sentiment's strong, right? Because you don't have sentiment, those names will not move in the direction you want them to, because the index is heavily correlated to those names, right? So Facebook, Apple, Amazon, whichever, and only on key breakouts. That's where understanding price action comes into play. Knowing which key levels you need to break, why it's a key level, why it's not a key level, and that just all comes down to just personal strategies I created over such a long period of time.
I love how you explain flags and how price action goes back into the flags, your CEI video. And if you haven't watched that, I'd go to her YouTube and really watch that video. It's a pure price action. It's no crappity crap on her screens. It's just price levels and why when it goes in here, it moves up to here. I've never heard anyone explain it like that. So it was really cool.
Lori.
What percentage of your trading is options, futures, commons?
I'd probably say at least, definitely like 20% of my trading is options, and the rest probably being commons.
Okay.
I don't really do too much crypto. I definitely research a ton of crypto and do a lot of analysis on it, but I've always said that if I want to be able to sleep, I should probably not trade futures. So I just kind of watch them and analyze them more than I trade them, if that makes sense. Otherwise I'm up all night watching. It's like an obsession. So I just I try to just stick to options and commons.
Well, they have more data, so they're good to analyze always. Even if you don't trade them, they're going to give you more data for during the day trading with SPY. So what is the most valuable trait that you think traders need to be successful?
I think being adaptive, right? You have to be adaptive to all situations in the market, whether it's a bullish market, bearish market, volatile market, just being able to accept something for what it is, because a lot of the market is just acceptance, right? So it's accepting when you're wrong and your if and or statements for how to be right and how to just kind of quickly switch your mind. It's having pretty much zero emotions when it comes to trading.
I've heard it explained you have to be a mercenary soldier. So if your team is, the team is red and green, if you want to say for bears and bulls, you have to be able to switch teams. Like you have no loyalties to anybody. You have to just stay open.
The market has no loyalty to us, right?
Zero.
Yeah.
And I would say the lack of flexibility and ego are the two things that I see that just bomb traders out and they blow up because they don't want to say that they're wrong and admit it, and they're not flexible to changing market conditions, because we've seen a different market in the last month.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of that, the ego usually stems from being right in a right market. So you were never actually right.
Yeah.
You were just in the right direction at the right time, right? It's kind of like
True.
You just got caught and you took a back road and there was no traffic by coincidence, right? So it's really, it comes down to, were you on the right side because you understood your overall market and the sentiment and the risk reward that was playing into it, or were you just right because you just by coincidence happened to be right? And that's where, like you said, a lot of that ego stems from that. It's just, I saw a bunch of it today on Twitter, and it was actually pretty sad, to say the least. I have to say something, because at the end of the day, it's especially from veteran traders, right? Okay, so you don't have to boast on there about, well, I told you so. I told you, right? It's like
everybody called it. Everyone called the top of the market.
Calls it, but it's like, but what about all the 12,000 times that you didn't call it? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It's not about being right or wrong, and it's not about thinking that you're better than someone else, right? And like, oh, I feel like just retail traders this, retail traders that. Well, then teach them. You know what I mean? It's like, because you were once inexperienced too, and no one is born experienced, right? Everyone always has to learn. So,
and that comes through pain usually in some form of or another. You have to feel that. It's like a kid putting their hand on a hot stove. They have to touch it, and they're like, I'll never do that again. And trading is a lot of hot stoves, a lot of touching things that are going to burn.
And I do think that you have to experience it for your own sometimes to learn the hard way, right? Like, you do have to take those losses. You do have to experience it firsthand, whether it's playing an earnings play, playing, oversizing your positions, whatever the case may be, not taking the time to learn and study sector rotations and such. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, your presence online. And if you want to be, an image for new traders, it really comes down to character, right? So always, like, I always told myself, no matter what, I'll always stay true to who I am and my character as a person, right? I'm the kind of person in person, if I see someone that needs help or someone that's asking for money, or I'm always the first one to jump at that, right? So, and I'll be the first one to do that online too, right? Of course, we take pride in our hard work. I work hard. So on days where, I am on the right side of the trade, I try to position it in a way where I can show it in an educational format versus being like, I told you so, right?
Drop the mic, mic attitude.
Exactly. I
have one more trading psychology question to sneak in here before we go see a chart. So in your about section on your website, you talk about trading psychology, and that's what you mentor traders, and that's one thing that you focus on. What would you say that when you work with a newer trader or someone you're mentoring, what are some of the switches that you like to flip on and they're like, I had a VA, light bulb moment?
I think a lot of it stems from just looking at who you are as a person too, because a lot of that will come back into trading, right? So I try pinpointing someone's strengths, weaknesses in their personal life more, because as soon as I ask someone what their strengths and weaknesses are, it's funny because they always talk about trading, but it's like, no, because that doesn't necessarily have to reflect on trading. Who you are actually can reflect in trading. That's where the ego comes from, right? That's where the lack of execution comes from, or over analyzing things, right? Those are usually like the overthinkers or people that are over analytical. That's why a lot of the smart guys don't always succeed in technical trading, because they're over analyzing things so much, right? So I think from that standpoint, it's really just pinpointing it down to who we actually are and trying to improve on that. And it doesn't have to necessarily just improve in trading, but I find if you actually improve in life, then it'll reflect in your trading, because the most important things are really discipline and patience. And those are two things that naturally as people, we don't really have. And something I always say too is there's no rule book when it comes to trading. We make the rules. And something that a lot of traders don't really realize is, when we're at home, we have rules, and when we're at work, we have rules, and when we're at school, we have rules. But when it comes down to trading, we're the ones making those rules. And unless we're the ones, initiating those rules and actually putting them into place and taking action and discipline, if we don't, respect those rules, then we're going to be the ones to essentially suffer, right? Like no one else.
I say trading is a therapist you never knew you needed. Because it's like a mirror, like staring back at you. And if your issue is whatever issue you have, it, like you said, ego, lack of flexibility, discipline, conviction, whatever it is, if you're a fickle personality, trading will reflect it back, and you have to fix it and get to the core of it in your life, and then it'll get fixed in your trading. It's pretty wild.
It really is, because it's kind of like when I was a kid, I was a very, 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 very shy child, right? So I never used to talk. I always used to just, be that kid in class that just like never talked to anyone. But I knew what I was doing, right? I was definitely a bright kid, but I was never really confident in engaging in those conversations or trying it for myself. It's always like, even like dancing, I'd look at people dance and be like, I feel like I could do that, but I would never actually do it. Right? I feel like, okay, someone's singing. I'm like the kind of person that everyone's in a room laughing, I'm like the one that's not laughing. If everyone's like singing in a car ride, I'm usually the one that's playing the music, right? So a lot of that comes from me being just a little bit introverted and shy, and that really came into play with my execution, right? So I'm an overthinker. I would overanalyze everything, and then I'd be like, oh yeah, that was right. Why didn't I take the trade? So I think the 2017 was a learning lesson, because Twitter was good because it helped me build my confidence in execution, because so many people were engaging and really helping me see my my trades and my analysis and how well it works, that it's like I got to a point where then I became too confident, right? And then I was like, oh wow, I just said goodbye to my old conservative self, and I was like, well, I'm just gonna buy like $10,000 worth of Google options, right? No, like, so you have to always find a balance. And I think it's once we discover who we are and our strengths and weaknesses, it's not about changing it entirely. It's just about finding that balance, because everything in life has to do with just being balanced, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So do you want to go look at a chart? I want to see your chart. I want to see that SPY chart. So I hope that this video is timeless, and so someone watching it 5 months from now, they can pick up tips. So it doesn't, I'm not specifically talking about today's price action technical analysis, but I just want to show them how you analyze a chart. So if you don't mind, could you show us your SPY chart?
Yeah, why don't we look, I guess I just want to use something that we actually did trade. So why don't we just look at the SPY short from this morning?
Okay.
And then why and when I sat out for the period, I sat out for the rest of the day pretty much after that. And I'll show you why. So let's go back here. Okay, so here's the SPY chart from this morning. Let me clear this out. We'll go back to the day. So I went into this week thinking, okay, well, Friday's sentiment was pretty strong and pretty bullish, but that could really change depending on a few things today. That's where sentiment comes in, right? So I knew we had some Fed speakers this morning that were talking early on. Plus I have I can show you as actually my report. So some things we were looking for. We've been pretty long on crude. That's been probably our biggest play for the last month and a bit. I knew that we had motor vehicle sales, so I had GM and Ford on watch. And then for lower volatility, that was my IBM play. Bank of America, Citigroup were some other names that I was looking for. And then I just wanted to see what the cannabis names would do. But essentially, I knew that we were kind of hitting that lower volatility range and consumers possibly. So when I went into today, I knew that the way that we trade on the SPY is going to be heavily dependent on how we traded last night. And how we traded last night was flat. Right. So I waited. I actually woke up at like 2:30 in the morning just to check to see if we broke that bear flag, and we didn't. So I was like, okay, we didn't break that bear flag. So I know we're going to be stuck in a range until that 5-hour stick is over. And that 5-hour stick's not going to be over till 10 a.m. Eastern. So I know we're not going to see any real volatility until we break out of that inside candle. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
We were stuck inside that candle for 5 hours overnight, 10 hours actually. So I was like, okay, well, this isn't going to break until we hit 10 a.m. and it's going to break outwards or upwards, right? So, and then just looking at it from an overall market view. So we had a daily bear flag. It's a double bear flag. We had that weekly tweezer top. And I always say patterns don't mean anything until there's follow through. Right. So, and I have this thing called open close trading. So I always look to see how we open on the week, how we close on the week. Yeah, how we open on the month, how we close on the quarter, etc. We just entered a new month. We just entered a new quarter. I've been working with this weekly bull flag for quite some time. This is how I measured my risk for the whole month of September. And you can see today we kind of hit that bottom range of that spot, right? Right. That was essentially the low of the day today. This was my full-on risk for the month of September, which we never got to. That's my max downside risk, and we ended up hitting the median. I won't go too detailed, but for starters here, this was my 2-hour breakout on Friday if you guys were watching my Twitter. So I wait for things to form. This was my bull flag that was forming. This was the previous bear flag fill, if you guys can see that, right? And we definitely filled that. That was kind of my upper risk reward ratios from Friday. We caught this really nice long. We caught this short early on in that first half. And I actually like red because that forms my formation. So I'm the kind of trader that if I'm seeing something come down, it's like I pre-plan this. So I'm drawing this before it even happens. You're anticipating the right side of the chart like no other. That anticipation, and I tell everybody, we use the left side of the chart to anticipate the right side of the chart. And discipline, conviction are two important things in trading. And the third muscle that's developed is anticipation. And that's what you're talking about. You can see how it's going to form. You can just start visualizing it to the right side. And I get that with your videos. And it's a very interesting and unique way to look at the chart. Yeah, essentially. So like when we were trading this on Friday, I can't remember if we had a 10 or I can't remember what kind of bearish pattern we had, but essentially what we did was we popped up in the morning, and I always use the pre-market levels. I know a lot of people don't, but I always use them. I always use pre-market and after hour levels because I try finding patterns that are forming before they form, because to me personally, price action is price action. I don't care what time it occurred. It still occurred. It's still, yeah, it's
at part of Chart
still part
Guys,
of history.
we use extended hours, which is unusual. Like most people, we use it like you do. Now, if it's very little volume, sometimes we'll disregard it if it just has a wick up or a wick down, like just a liquidity probe. But in general, SPY, QQQ, they have tons of volume after hours, so we can use that data for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know why, like don't limit your trade. So this was that half-hour bear flag that I spotted on Friday. Can you guys see that there?
Yep, and I saw you tweeting it real
Yeah,
time.
like during real time. So essentially what I'm working my way out to is that top. I want to see if we can retest those pre-market spots. We held off at that 42725, so I knew that would be a key spot. And then the timing of it, right? So I knew if we bounce off there, the timing of this here at 10 a.m. and between the time range of when this formed, this is a pull. And I already knew that we had a pull in pre-market.
Right.
I already knew that we had a pull. So I wanted the first part of the day to be red. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like I'm trying to time that. So,
just get the consolidation over with. Let the bulls take a little rest, get it over with, and then they got a tweezer bottom.
yeah, and that's kind of like figuring out your measured risk, right? So I wasn't overly short. I wanted it to bounce off 427 so I can take it long again, right?
Mm-hmm.
And essentially to form that, I need to kind of break back in this range here. And this was the full break. So this morning when I'm looking at this, right, I'm using these same exact spots. And if you notice in the futures session yesterday, that's actually where we stalled.
Right.
We stalled right at the top range of that flag. And I'll show you the hourly here too. There was that hourly extended flag formation here. This was the bottom stick. I'll go to the lows in a second here. I just want to show you guys the morning. So when you're looking at this on the 2 hour, you see how we technically did breach this morning, the upper wick,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's the lowest wick on the 2 hour, that 431333. We breached that in pre-market. We hit 43128. In my pre-market prep this morning, I looked at that and I was like, okay, well, we technically did breach that in the pre-market. I always use those as hints because I think that the market gives us clues. It's just up to us to find them. So this morning when we were looking at this for a short, I'm looking to see if it can break that top range, and it couldn't, right? So this was the break early morning. We'll go back here. This is that previous 2 hour.
I am paying attention. I'm just checking the room and making sure we're not missing anything.
Yeah, I essentially wanted to see if it would break, and it couldn't. So as soon as we didn't break over those key spots, I'm going back here and I'm looking to see if we can form any bearish formations, and we did. We formed on that. So when you see this here, this is into a new hour. I don't know if you can see that 1 minute bear flag. That's right into the new hour, right here.
Mm-hmm.
And this is it's into the new hour at my key spot. My key spot is at 43128 and 43133.
That's awesome. And you're live broadcasting this through the day?
Yeah, we were live trading this one. So when I'm looking at this, I know it could be possibly bearish. That's my time analysis, that we could be bearish for a full hour. So, and I try finding a bigger formation here. And when we looked at the 10-minute chart, there was a definite 10-minute bear flag here this morning, right? So here's my 10-minute from the early morning. You guys can see that?
Yep.
Okay, so let me clear this out just to show you guys something here. This is time frame analysis. This is how you can tell if something's going to break higher or lower within that given time frame. Because like I said, a pattern is only a pattern if there's follow through. If there's no follow through, it doesn't matter.
Right.
It's not really technically a bearish pattern anymore.
It's not a valid pattern. Yeah.
Exactly. So the timing of this was into the hour at 10, right? So, and then the timing of this was right at 9:50. The lowest wick on this was, what's that lowest wick there? 43216.
Mm-hmm.
I know in order for this to be a true bear flag, it has to take out the previous candle's low and the first initial low. It has to break it, but it has to do it within that 10 minutes.
Right.
It can't do it after the fact. So I'm really watching the clock, right? And I'm watching to see if we can break below those spots in the morning at that same level or not. And when I was watching it here, so this is the first few minutes, you see how well it kind of chopped right around there. It hit that to the penny, right? That's the 948 candle. Here's that 10-minute time frame, right? Right over here. You see how it hits that high, right to that 433.17 and 20, and then it makes a shooting star down. This is my 10-minute bear flag. Okay,
TA makes me want to just cry with happy tears. I love technical analysis. It's so amazing. It just makes me happy. And especially, I'm very open to learning new styles. Like, I don't judge, like, the strat, awesome. Whatever your technical analysis is that works, but this is close to what we do. So I am following along, and it's absolutely fascinating.
Thank you. Especially with this. So when you're watching this clock, right? You're seeing here 956, 957, 958. You couldn't break that level within here before the 10-minute close. That's how you know your bear flag is still valid, because it would have taken out the 433 before that 10 was up.
Interesting.
Just like it took out that 432.16 when the 10 started. This is how you know it's continued. And look at the next candle after it took out that 16. That's your nasty bear flag down. And then this is our whole continuation down. Let me show you here. This is it down. This was our short.
Yeah.
And I won't get into like deep detail. We obviously had some price levels that we had in there from our 42768 spot, but this was the full trend down until we hit some major support. We were obviously using my 2-hour bull flag as some major levels of resistance. So I knew that if we, as support story, I knew if we fail those key spots, this thing is going to trigger lower.
Yeah.
And essentially I'm filling the bottom of my flag. That's what I'm doing. Right, I'm basically just coming right back down to that bottom range of my bull flag. It's kind of like you're doing the reverse. It's like you're going right back down to where you started. So I know if we break these key spots, that's essentially my downside risk, right? And that's pretty much where we stalled and where we stopped.
It's interesting, your CEI video is the actual opposite, where you had an old bear flag, came down, and then you went back up into that price action, and it's so similar. I love how you explain.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure if it's even called a bear flag. I kind of just made that up, but it's just really an area where there's a lot of supply and demand, right? Yeah. So that's all you're really looking at it from, because anything with trading is all about supply and demand.
Yeah, so they're just going to the liquidity. Can I ask you, how many names a day do you watch?
That's relative to market sentiment. So if market sentiment's strong, then I'll usually trade a few more. But overall names that I'm watching, I have a top stock watch list. These are all my favorite stocks, right? And I'll kind of gauge this. So if I glance at this in the morning, I have a pretty good idea of what's moving, what's not, which sectors are moving. I'm always looking at the market view. I want to see what's green in the pre-market, right? What's trending down, what's inverse to one another. That will really help you decide how the overall trading day is going to go. And this morning we had crude up, banks up. So we did trade. Well, we've been trading crude, so we took that. We've still been swinging that for a while, but Bank of America, Citigroup were some early trades for us, Ford, GM. But I knew my sentiment was weak after that first hour, and this is why. So when we go back to that SPY trade, as soon as we hit that bottom here, right? This is kind of the low. This was like the end of our short, the tail end of it, right? So we got the first hour short around 11 o'clock. That's when we're essentially scaling out most of that 42723. And notice how it hit my 42723 right at the hour ending close, because I knew the duration of the trade was an hour, because the 10-minute bear flag formed into the hour. That's my duration of the trade, but my pattern is on the 10-minute. Does that make sense?
Totally.
So it's kind of like I'm trying to time the trade based on that. Also based on economic events. I know that we have Fed speakers at 10. That's going to help drive it down. And there was lots of talks about inflation. Right? We're at an all-time high. So
and it didn't help
taking that sentiment with it.
The Facebook, Apple, Google stuff midday didn't help the market either. So what percentage of trading do you do swing versus day trading?
I think, again, that's based on overall dynamic. I have a lot more flexibility now to day trade. So I think now that I have more flexibility to day trade, I've been day trading a whole lot more. And probably because of overall market dynamic too. But I always say that there's still a swing market, right? So it really depends on how you're looking at the market as a whole. Like we were still swinging crude names back in February, March, April, May. We were still, swinging some of the lower volatility plays like Pfizer and Kroger last year or this year. So it really is just relative to the sectors that I'm trading and the opportunities that I'm seeing. But right now, in terms of volatility and seasonality, September, October is pretty volatile.
Right.
So I had posted my weekly report a few weeks ago, and I had said, we've run out of options because there comes a point where nothing will really survive. You can still have some really good swing trades like we had with crude recently, right? But it all depends on the actual sector and how much of an economic driven factor that sector plays. Like crude plays a really huge one, just as gold does, just as, you know, Bitcoin and all those other names. But it's all relative to how I'm feeling the overall sentiment is of the market, and kind of where we are in terms of an extension in the month. Because when I first started trading, I always have people ask me, like, what books do you read? I didn't read any TA books. All the books I've ever read were seasonality driven. So I was a huge seasonality trader because, well, one, commodities, two, I used to be in power and gas trading. Right. So kind of with power and gas, we went long June, July, August, and then we sold into fall because I know the seasonality of the market for power and gas, especially power names, right? They're hot during the hot months, and you know, we usually would turn our plants off in the milder seasons like fall and spring. So a lot of it is really logical, I think, in terms of swing trading. It's just how you apply it to the market.
Do you mind toggling the screen back to your face so we can see? Sorry, I thank you so much for showing me your charts. I get mesmerized by your yellow lines. I don't have a problem with them whatsoever.
No, I was going to add here though too. So I was looking to see if we'd form that potential hourly bear flag, and we didn't, right? And this is a good example. You know how on the 10-minute we took out the lows? This was a good example to show chop and how to decide which direction you're going to take. It didn't take out the lows in that hour. That's how you knew it wasn't a valid bear flag. That's when I sat out and I was like, this isn't breaking lower. I'm just going to sit out for the rest of the day. And I did. So just another example there. And the timing of that, I'll show you this real quick and then I'll turn off the screen because I wanted to show an example of one that broke and one that didn't, just so that you can see how well market timing really works. Here's that low, right? Mm-hmm. And that's right at the 41 mark. Here's right into the hour. You see how it hit that at 46? Mm-hmm. That's a full hour duration. For it to back test that same low, it didn't take it out. But right here, you know, if it's an hourly bear flag, it has to break that spot before the hour is over. And it didn't. 12:58, and it was breaking upwards. That's how I knew it wasn't breaking lower.
That's a very unique view to the market, and I love it. I'm going to have to study it a little more. I love it. So, what is your number one trading rule you would never break?
That I would never break? Mm-hmm. Probably something like this. Like, I think time analysis is huge. So if the time is telling me not to, then I usually will stick to that because I find that everything is there in front of you. It's just, again, like I said, it's up to you to decide that. So kind of like that hourly bear flag, right? It's like, no, I'm not gonna stay short because I know it's not breaking that range, right? Because time told me it's not. So
we all do this in various degrees as to how we trade, but just listening to you explain trading, it makes me think of an escape room. Do you know what those are? Like, you're like getting all these puzzle pieces. Oh, there's that key. Oh, there's that key. Oh, and Izzy's like getting everybody out of the escape room first because she can put these puzzle pieces together. Timing, bear flags, sticks. It's pretty cool. So what was your most memorable trade ever?
Well, there's probably been a lot. You know, obviously 2020, 2021, there's a lot of memorable ones, but I feel like that doesn't even count, right? So like I had plug at like 350, we had TLRY at like 7, we had like all those big plays, NEO, right? FCEL, it doesn't like TIGR, QD, but I think more recently, so ever was for sure HD, which I talked about in a past interview. I think that was back in 2017, 2018, but more recently, definitely CPE. Or COP, sorry. So COP was a huge break for us recently this week, and especially based on how the overall dynamic has been in the market. So even on a day like today, it's still surging. Right. And similar to IBM, and this is kind of like where I try to stay alive. It's not really so much about being memorable in terms of, how do I say this? Money. It's not memorable in terms of money. or something monetary, it's memorable in terms of how well this thing has reacted during extreme volatility, just like IBM. So when I think of volatility, I think of IBM. And I remember my IBM trade earlier in the year. And I remember my Oracle trades earlier in the year. And that was my biggest long going into like the beginning of the year, because it pretty much acted like the volatility index. It was crazy.
Right.
It was like they were trading correlated to each other. And I remember someone tweeted me on Twitter like a few months back and was like, tech is dead. And I was like, IBM's entered the chat, because IBM was not dead, right? And again, look at today. It came back and showed its strength. It's kind of crazy.
Oracle wouldn't roll over. And UPST was really strong today too. I like to I call them money badgers. Like names that can outperform the market, like little honey badgers. I like finding those names. They're fun to trade. Okay, so if you don't have anything else, I'm going to wrap it up with a little game, just a quick game.
Okay.
And if you watch my interview with Sarah, this or that. So you have to pick for the rest of your life. I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
So you can only trade one of these two for the rest of your life. SPY or Amazon?
SPY.
Oil or nat gas?
Oil.
Options or commons?
Options.
Pizza or burgers?
Neither. I don't like pizza or burgers.
What?
I know, weird.
You're a big foodie. What's your favorite food?
I am, but I'm also like Mediterranean, so I never really grew up eating that kind of food.
Okay.
So it's kind of like when I do eat it, it's like, this is good, but it makes my stomach hurt.
I saw you cooked, or you got chicken, was it tikka?
Yes, I actually ordered that. People were asking for the recipe. It was so good.
It was bomb.
It was so good.
Okay, well, crypto or futures? If you had to trade only one of those for the rest of your life, you had to get in there and trade them, which one do you think interests you the most?
I would say futures, just because it's more flexible and historically has been around longer.
Yeah. And I have this question, but I don't know if TradingView or Toss. What broker do you use, by the way? I should ask that.
Well, we've got Thinkorswim here in Canada, but I feel like people forget that I'm Canadian. So my version of TD is not Thinkorswim.
It's not the same.
It's like a TD desktop software. It's completely different.
Totally different.
If you follow Fit Trader Rick, I think he uses it too. I think I watched his video and was like, okay, another Canadian that uses my broker. But yeah, I mean, TradingView is a great platform, and it's integrated into Benzinga, which is what I use.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Lululemon or Nordstrom? You can only shop at one for the rest of your life.
Lululemon, hello, it's
Hello?
Canadian. What? Come on. I was wearing Lululemon in junior high school. That was before it was ever in the States. They're actually Western Canadian, so it's like their headquarters is like 10 hours away from my
I
house.
forget that. I totally forget
and it's crazy to look back and be like, wow, Lululemon is trading at that? Just like Canada, it's crazy. They were just a small little boutique store.
Yeah, I love them. My kids love them. I have 4 girls. And they all shop there all the time. Yes. Thank God they're not on my dime anymore. Only one is left. So Twitter or Instagram?
I would never even think that you had any kids.
I have 5. Twitter or Instagram?
Twitter.
Duh.
Yeah,
but your Instagram is getting more active.
I tried. I would say I tried for like a good solid 2 weeks, and then I was just like, I don't know. It's kind of like the visual on there. I don't really. Yeah, I think I started at the wrong time. I feel like had I started TikTok and Instagram when things were actually surging, it would have been a little bit easier. Whereas right now, things have definitely slowed down. And
especially today when you can't even log on.
Yeah,
most people couldn't log on today. So.
Exactly. And I find that, it's a little bit harder to filter on Instagram than it is on Twitter.
Yeah, true. Well, I can't say thank you enough from the bottom of my heart for sitting down with me. I find you absolutely fascinating in every way. Your journey, how you trade, how you chart, I just find it absolutely fascinating. And I have a girl crush. I have a trader crush.
You're too sweet.
All right.
Thank you. I can proudly say that you're definitely one of the best interviewers I've had to date.
Thank you.
You were great.
Thank you.
Really structured, and you let the presenters speak and share their thoughts, and it wasn't rushed. It was very natural.
Well, I got this ring light, and I feel like I'm getting a sunburn, so obviously I need to get a new ring light.
Yeah, that's like this. I just put this because I'm like, okay, well, I don't know. It's just like
yeah, this thing is burning me. All right, well, I'm gonna wrap it up. Thank you again, and I'll chat with you on Twitter.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.